Hey everybody, I am Brady Briggs. Welcome to another episode of the Combat Logic. I'm back here to do a UFC on ESPN 37 post fight, as well as a Bellator 281 post fight. So we should get into Bellator considering that happened sooner. One of Conor McGregor's teammates, Charlie Ward, he got a unanimous decision win. That was cool to see. Couldn't watch the fight, but it was cool to see. Heboss. Daniel Weichel picked up his first finish since 2016 and his second finish since 2014 over a UFC veteran, Rob Whiteford. That was cool to see. Paul Daly ends up going out with a bang. That was cool. Paul Daly was initially slated against Andrei Koreshkov, and if Wendell Gashimo was able to out-wrestle Daly the way he was, I really think Koreshkov would have beat him pretty solemnly. So I'm glad that fight ended up getting scrapped and they got him a late replacement. Because Wendell looked really good in this fight. He was controlling the entire fight really right up until he got knocked out at 4:09 of round 2. Paul Daly, man, what a career he had. No, he retires with a record of 44-18-2. Okay, 35 of those 44 wins come by knockout. He's one of the most vicious strikers the sport has ever seen. I'm sad to see that we won't see him anymore, but I'm glad he went on a win like that. And nonetheless, 35 of his wins come by knockout. Most of them are KOs too. He doesn't have too many TKOs sprinkled in there. And the only stand-up fight he ever lost was against Nick Diaz in MMA. He's also 23-1, or 21-3 rather, as a pro kickboxer. So thank you for your career, Paul Daly. I surely enjoyed watching it. Man, Fabian Edwards ends his 2-fight losing streak. Leon Edwards' brother ends his skid with a vicious knockout of Lyoto Machida. No, I don't think many of us expected that. Honestly, I thought Machida was going to pick him apart to a decision. But man, Fabian caught him with a nasty elbow that had him hurt, and he just swarmed him and absolutely starched him at 3:18 to round 1. And then Logan Storley versus Michael Page. See, I wasn't able to watch this fight because I was working. I had to go back and watch these other ones. I watched the highlight video of it, and it looked pretty even to me. That's what the scorecard said. It was a split decision. But Scott Coker, Bellator's president, said that he thought Michael Page won that fight. And I wish it was uploaded by now. I really would like to watch it. But I kind of wish Michael Page won too, because I'd rather see Michael Page fight Yaroslav Amosov than see a rematch with Logan Storley. You know, going into this fight, Michael Page was 20-1 as a pro. He had avenged his only loss. Storley was 13-1, I believe. Yeah, he was 13-1 coming in, and his only loss was a split decision to Yaroslav Amosov in a fight that could have gone either way. He could have very well been undefeated. So you have someone that could very easily be undefeated against someone who had avenged their only loss. You know, you'd think that would spell for absolute fireworks, but that's not what people thought of it. And then UFC on ESPN 37, Andrei Petroski submitted Nick Maximov with an anaconda choke. Just 1 minute and 16 seconds of the first round. I couldn't believe that. Like, I really thought this fight was going to go the distance. I thought it was going to be really close. I thought it was going to be back and forth. They're pretty much the same fighter as far as what I've seen so far from each of them. They've each only fought a couple times in the UFC, but they look pretty damn similar to me. And yeah, dude, Petroski submits him early. Like, I couldn't believe it. You know, Nick Maximov comes from the Diaz Academy. You know, his jiu-jitsu is going to be good. And yeah, he couldn't stop it. Michael Johnson picked up a vintage win, ending his 4-fight losing streak. That was really cool to see. He was tagging Patrick as soon as the fight started, really. His cross, man, he's still just as fast as ever. He's still got power too. But at 35 years old, you know, it's hard to say, but he ended his 4-fight skid. It was really cool to see. Since losing to Khabib Nurmagomedov, though, Michael Johnson just hasn't been the same fighter. He really hasn't. He's beaten such great guys, though. He's the type of guy that could knock out Charles Oliveira easily. and then get 30-25 by someone that's unranked. He is that type of fighter. He beat Edson Barboza when Edson Barboza was a top 5 guy. He beat Tony Ferguson. He was the only guy to beat Tony Ferguson through Ferguson's first 16 UFC fights. Through his first 16 UFC fights, he went 15-1, only losing to Michael Johnson. And he also knocked out Dustin Poirier in less than 2 minutes. But then since getting absolutely mauled by Khabib, and then knocked out by Justin Gaethje, going down to featherweight, I thought it was a great move for him, and he was looking great against Darren Elkins early on, but he ends up getting taken down and submitted. That's 3 straight losses, 1-5 in his last 6. And then he beat Andre Fili and Ardo Lobov before getting knocked out by Josh Emmett, losing to Stevie Ray, getting submitted by Thiago Moises, losing to Clay Guida, and now he comes back and knocks out Alan Patrick. That was awesome to see. Well, Torres, I'm excited to see what this kid can bring in the future. He knocked out Frank Camacho in the first round, and Camacho hasn't done too well for himself lately either, but that was a big win for someone making their UFC debut. Caitlyn Chukagian and Amanda Heboss, I don't think this decision went the right way. I wasn't watching the entirety of it because I had to go back and forth between Triller that I was covering, but every time I switched back to the channel, Heboss was on top. Heboss was doing her thing, but nonetheless, Caitlyn Chukagian picks up the win. She's the first fighter to have her first 11 wins in the UFC go the distance. Davey Grant and Luis Smolka, this was a good fight. Now, Grant came out with a fierce pace in round 1, and he was landing some nasty combinations on Smolka, just cracking him, and he ends up going to the body, starting to go to the body toward the end of the round. And you think the second round is going to be more than the same, but Smolka comes out with a furious pace in the second. And Grant appears a little tired, like he may have used too much energy in the first round. And Smolka ends up landing some really nice elbows to split the guard of Grant. He had a good second round. It's probably 19-19 going into the third. And then Smolka ends up rolling for some sort of submission, or he goes for a takedown, something I don't exactly remember. And Grant stays on top of him, and I'm like, dude, stand up. And he doesn't need to, because he rains down some hammer fists and gets the KO victory from the top position. It was really cool to see. Davey Grant has had a really interesting career too, because it's been so riddled with injuries. But coming off the Ultimate Fighter, a lot of people had some high hopes for him. He went 1-3 through his first 4 UFC fights, getting submitted in all 3 losses. Meanwhile, 8 of his 9 wins at that point came via submission. Got submitted in all 3 of his losses, beat Marlon Vera by a decision. Since then, since coming back, he has defeated Gregory Popov via split decision. It was a close fight. And then he got a 3rd round knockout, a 2nd round. Yeah, a 3rd round knockout, a 2nd round knockout. He lost his rematch to Marlon Vera, and he looked really good in the first round of that fight too. He lost a split decision to Adrian Yanez, very close. Yanez is a prodigy too. And then he comes back and knocks out Luis Smolka in the 3rd round. He seems to be the type of fighter that rallies late, and it's pretty awesome. Ryan Spann looked absolutely incredible against Jan Kudelaba. He stunned him on the feet, and Kudelaba was trying for the takedown to save his life throughout the whole fight, really. He got Spann down a few times and even had him in mount, but Spann was able to get up each time. And then the last takedown attempt, Kudelaba shot on, he got locked in a guillotine. Spann had been looking for that guillotine for, the majority of the fight, actually. And Kudelaba's defense looked good, but at 2:22 of round 1, he ends up getting tapped. And Spann was coming off a loss to Anthony Smith. He's now back on the winning track. And then Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic. This was a pretty good fight. You can tell both these guys came from kickboxing backgrounds, the way they were throwing leg kicks at each other. Blachowicz coming off his title losing effort to Glover Teixeira. Alexander Rakic was coming off of 2 wins against Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos. Both pretty boring fights, but got the win. And Blachowicz ends up winning the fight via injury. And he didn't even do anything to Racic's leg. Rakic had an injury 3 weeks out of the fight, a knee injury, and the same injury came back up in this fight early in the 3rd round, and it was stopped. Now, something I want to say about Jan Blachowicz, he's now 10-2 in his last 12 after opening up his UFC career 2-4. So that's pretty awesome. And Rakic is now 6-2 in the UFC. He only ever lost his first fight. He got submitted in his first fight. Since then, he won 8 straight with 7 knockouts, finishing all of them. And he came to the UFC with a record of 8-1. Won his first 4 fights, knocking out the latter 2 opponents. Then he lost a split decision to Volkan Ozdemir. That could have gone either way. It was a very, very close fight. Ozdemir, former title challenger, really nothing to be ashamed of there. He then comes back and wins these next 2 fights before losing to Blachowicz. And a fight that a lot of people wouldn't really consider a real loss. You know, he's 6-2 in the UFC now, and he still has yet to really lose. You know, his 2 losses, a split decision that he could have won easily if one of those other judges could have seen it his way, which could have been very plausible, and then an injury and a fight he was looking good in. You know, the first round, Blachowicz was starting to tag him up a little bit, so Rakic takes him down. See, that's the thing about Rakic. That's why I think he's still a future champion, is because he comes from a kickboxing background. He did very well in that sport. And then he comes over to MMA. He's doing very well in this sport. His striking is great. He is brutally powerful, but he has wrestling to rely on, and he can make fights boring and, you know, win on the cards when he's not doing too awfully well. That's a very important trait to see out of a younger talent. I think he's like 30 years old, but at 205, yeah, he's 30, but at 205 pounds, they come into their prime a little bit later, a lot like heavyweights. So yeah, I still think he's going to win the belt in the future. And Blachowicz may have set himself up for the winner of Glover Teixeira and Yuri Prochazka, which would be cool to see. Be cool to see him rematch Glover, or it'd be cool to see him fight Yuri. I would love to see that fight. Now we gear up for UFC Vegas 55 going on this coming weekend. Let me know what you guys thought of the fights. Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Hey! 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 I was down, but now I'm up. Being rich really got me bugged. 100K knows not enough. My bad man fall in love. Run up on God. Let's have some fun. Hello, 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 hello. With the lights out, it's so dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. I'm so stupid, it gets dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. I'm alive, and I'm born now. I'm a speedo, my libido. Hey, hey, I'm building a legacy, filling with shit I can stack on the shelf. I hope that I make it past 27 without killing myself.